Welcome to the Dirt Dude Conversations. My name's Andy Clark. I'm here today with Jean Lonie. Jean is fortunately on the other side of the world. Well, it just makes it a little bit interesting on a time zone difference. But Jean is the Director of Nuffield USA and is currently completing a PhD at Penn State University. So welcome this afternoon for you, Jean.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you, Andy.
Thank you. Coffee is here. I might be working my way through a bit of this during this conversation. Anyway, Jean, I just wonder if you could explain your PhD topic for us, because I think it's really sort of pertinent to international agriculture.
Absolutely happy to. I'm studying the public value of global agricultural capacity building programs. What that means for me is I'm delving into the phenomenon of the Nuffield Farming Scholars Program and trying to get a sense of what it means beyond the individual that participated.
Okay, so in terms of that, what sort of drove you specifically towards the Nuffield phenomenon?
So back in 2009, I first bumped into the Nuffield program. I was working for the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and some of the country leaders were in touch with us looking to host a Nuffield conference, specifically their Contemporary Scholars Conference in the United States in 2010. And I wound up being part of the group that helped plan that conference and pull some of the events together. And as I learned more about the program, I was pretty fascinated by it and realized that my global perspective on agriculture was nil. I really knew U.S. agriculture, and that was about it. And maybe didn't even know that as well as I'd like to. I knew my state very well. In touch with the program, and 2 years later, they actually offered me the chance to attend as a delegate, which I did over to the Netherlands and to the UK, and I was fascinated by it. And from there, just started to work with the program a little bit more to do some conference facilitation and to see what the opportunities were to get the United States of America involved. And as I worked in the private sector and worked with Nuffield and was involved with a leadership program here in Pennsylvania, it just kept dawning on me that companies and foundations that we were looking to have invest in these programs didn't speak the same language that Nuffield and other leadership and capacity building programs did. There really was a disconnect there. And having a foot in both worlds, I was fascinated by it. And that really is what drove me to step out of the private sector and work here at Penn State to explore the topic.
And so in terms of actually exploring the value of these programs, can you explain to me, I guess, the importance of building human capital capacity within the agricultural sector and also the concept of public value as well?
Absolutely. So the capacity building piece is really fascinating because the default is people want to say it's a leadership program, or it's leadership development, but that's actually an outcome of it, or potentially an outcome of it. Capacity building is helping an individual develop. It's the catalyst for change. Something like Field could be the vehicle to me taking on more than I thought I could do, extending my awareness, maybe taking risks on the farm or on the ranch, finding my voice, and just having confidence to do things a little bit differently. So the capacity building really is about that personal development and growth, and then everything else is an outcome of that. Public value is fascinating because it looks at something other than the individual, but it's incredibly contested. So public value, if I were to say to you, Andy, what do you value? It may be wildly different than what I value. And that's not right or wrong. It just means it's very subjective. So trying to sit down and set what public value is, it's something that the public sector bumps into a lot with government. You know, we pay taxes, we put money into a kitty, these funds there, what should they be used for? Who actually has a say in what they should be used for? It's people with power. So they're determining the public value. In some ways, agriculture bumps into that as well. So there are a lot of people making determinations about our fate and our industry and how things are done. And they may think it's for the public value, but for what public? I just was fascinated by the fact that something that sounds so simple is so nuanced and so contested on sort of in the academic sphere. But digging into that would allow me to say that Nuffield was not just important for the person who traveled. That Nuffield scholar, there's a ripple effect, so that transformative experience that one person has actually can contribute to or have a manifestation and a significance to somebody else beyond them. Maybe it's at the farm level, maybe it's with the family, maybe it's in their community or as a global leader, but it's not solely an investment in one person that doesn't touch anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Purposes of the research I'm doing, I'm actually using a definition of public value that was developed by Laura Kalambakidis at the University of Minnesota. And that's the value of a program to those who do not directly benefit from the program. So what does it mean to people who didn't go through it but are potentially touched by it?
Mm-hmm. It's just listening to you to discuss that, and obviously myself being a Nuffield scholar, that human capacity building it. It's almost like one manifests into the other, because as you describe human capacity building in that regard, building the confidence into somebody so that whilst they believe their opinions are worthwhile and they do find that voice, it also gives them a greater ability to connect and collaborate as well. So therefore, not only influencing, but garnering a greater understanding of what that public value is as well. So it's
absolutely,
it's funny how it does manifest itself in that regard. So clearly, I'm not an outlier within the.
No, you're not. If it makes you feel better at all, you line up with the data. You're good.
Oh, I wanted to be an individual snowflake.
Well, you still are. That's okay. That's okay. We can have that talk on a different if we need to. We can. I can absolutely give you guidance on where you are unique.
So are there any other programs similar to Nuffield out there? So within the US or worldwide now, whether in agriculture or other industries that you think sort of develop similar outcomes?
Yeah. So that's a great question. There are some programs that I would say could fit in this sphere. The Eisenhower Fellows out of the US is a little bit comparable in that it's not scripted, but it involves travel, experiential travel and transformative travel around the world. Here in the United States, there is one Eisenhower Fellowship set for agriculture as well. And in recent years, we've tried to connect with them so that they can at least tap into the Nuffield network. There isn't anything that I'm aware of that is just like Nuffield in agriculture. There are some global and regional programs. There's a group out of Scotland, Scottish Enterprise. They do the Scottish Rural Leadership Program. There's the Australian Rural Leadership Program, which are country initiatives. Here in the United States, we have a number of state-based agricultural or rural leadership development programs, but those are more scripted with curriculum and set times to meet and things like that. Where Nuffield really is pretty unique is it's the combination of large group engagement, small group travel, and then self-directed exploration on a specific study topic with really the world as your classroom. So Nuffield's pretty unique in how it's structured and how it's set up. It also has one of the most extensive histories of any of the programs I've bumped into. It's 71 years old right now, so it dates back to just post-World War II. And now has almost 1,700 alums around the world. It's
I don't think that you can underestimate that global perspective. And like you said right at the beginning, that you realise just how small a part you are within the global sphere.
Absolutely.
And that essentially, as internationally, we're all sort of facing very similar challenges. It all comes back to the same. It's access to market, it's water, it's power, it's access to labour. It's the same thing, no matter where you are. It's not that much different between being in, Penn State to Victoria, Australia, to being in China. In some ways, the issues are still all mounting up in a similar outcome. So having the ability,
the challenge is.
I was just going to say having that ability to connect and understand others gives you greater understanding that others are treading the same path. They may have already done it, and then you've got the ability to learn from somebody else, and can really condense the time frame that's required for you to solve problems.
That's exactly right. The change shrinks immeasurably when you start to realize that and tap into the network. And it's fascinating having a history, a working history with Nuffield from 2010 until 2018. You are spot on that the topics aren't different. When we have the opportunity to get the scholars together in a room and they start to talk about things, it doesn't matter what country they're from, it doesn't matter what sector they're in. The big issues that worry them are the same issues. They come down to so many of the same things, and it's access to land and resources and capital and labor. It's also succession planning. It's bringing new people in. It's building communication with people who don't understand what's happening in agriculture. And it's also issues that are around communities. How do you build community buy-in to agriculture? How do you get people to understand that this could be a very isolating industry if you let it? So how do you build a network within that? So it's everything from technical and the technological through to the social and the community. And that is fascinating to me because there are so many of them where we know what they are, but there isn't necessarily a solution. It's just how to address it.
Just looking through some of your notes on your dissertation that you're putting together at the moment. Well, hopefully you'll be defended very, very soon. But
yes.
The concept of antifragility, that sort of really struck out to me. Can you explain that a little bit further?
Absolutely. So in one of the courses that I took, we read an article that was out based on the book Black Swan. And it was fascinating to me. And it's by Nicholas Taleb. And I just, this anti-fragility thing really just stuck with me as a concept. And basically the thought around anti-fragility, as the author frames it, is it's more than resiliency. So it's not just saying something bad happens and I can bounce back from it. It's understanding that something will happen. And how do I anticipate that? How do I see it coming? How do I get ahead of it? And then how do I turn it into a positive? Whether that's I've planned for big storms coming, and so I'm going to have a different crop or a different opportunity, or I'm going to be able to get ahead of the market and literally profit from it. Or seeing some of the issues that are coming down the pike and getting ahead of them so that not only are they not negatives, be sort of a thought leader or ahead of the curve in a lot of that. And in terms of managing it, it's the concept of, instead of being reactive, anticipating and getting ahead of it. And it's not just being that innovator or that early adopter. It's really just trying to think differently about what we bump into. And, the black swans are sort of those really big life-changing events that we never saw coming, but are going to continue to keep happening. And so I think in agriculture, that could be everything from storms to policy to consumer trends and preferences. How do we anticipate those and get ahead of them so that we're controlling our own destiny? And as individuals, we're not just resilient to the change that happens. We can be ahead of it and help shape it and be profitable through that change.
Yeah, it's I guess, and also in developing the human side of it as well. You're from a personal perspective, where not just from a business, but if they're having an experience that's really challenging themselves and pushing them outside of their comfort zone, it gives them the personal tools to deal with the stresses that come with these things as well.
That's exactly right. And in the research that I did, some of the questions that I asked were, did your Nuffield experience help you handle stress better on a personal level? Did it help you handle stress better on a professional level? But there's also what I hear through, I also did some key informant interviews. So I got to interview 16 scholars from around the world and talk to them about their experience, and have gotten to meet other scholars like you and talk about your experiences. And one of the delegates from the United States is actually who coined this phrase, and it's fantastic. So I give Kyle Amos all of the credit for it. He said, Nuffield is risk management.
Yes.
And I never looked at it that way before, but it's risk management at the human capacity level. So give me the opportunity to build this confidence, to find my voice, to go out. As soon as you're home, people are tapping you on the shoulder for things. So now you're a thought leader or an expert in your field. And all of that builds up to risk management, because you may have a different appetite to take on some risk or to try new things. Or what I've heard from a lot of the scholars interviews is, I'm not as worried if it doesn't work because I know I have the ability to fix it or to manage it. So I'm willing to try it because I don't think it's a zero-sum issue. If it doesn't work, then I'll adjust course and I'll fix it. And that's the type of risk management that there isn't a policy for. You have to build that up through personal capacity.
And it's the ability to prioritize. So
Absolutely.
that in part of that risk management, you go, okay, these are the key factors that I need to manage.
Yep.
And the rest sort of becomes a bit superfluous out the outside, and you don't sweat the small stuff quite so much.
Yeah. And the other piece, I've been going through interviews today, and so this is fresh in my mind as I go back through the interviews that I did over the summer. The folks that handle it the best are the ones who have also realized that they're not irreplaceable, that they're finding ways to delegate on the farm, and they're finding ways to bring in other bright ideas and other people and help them develop their capacity, or they're mentoring others. So it's not just them and every decision falls to them. They can think about the bigger picture and really worry about those big things that have to be managed, but they've got good people with them that are helping some of the details and the other pieces. And for me, doing a 5 to 6 week run of travel this past summer and fall was a great exercise in how do you plan a job that you're not done doing, but you're not physically there to manage every piece of it. And it really, despite being slightly stressful on the front end and planning it, it forced me to plan better. It forced me to anticipate things more. And it gave a few other people the chance to step up and do things that they would have had that opportunity if I had stayed here. So it really is fascinating how you start to approach things differently and have a little bit more appetite for that risk, because you know we'll figure it out.
And it's once you do, and you can get those pillars in place to support you along the way, it's incredibly liberating. For your mental clarity, if you're to be able to really focus on the if you know the bigger picture stuff and the things that need to that strategy that needs to be put into place. So
yeah, and it's it also really forces you to think about what are your strengths and what could somebody else step in with, and how do you diversify in a way that makes the operation better. I will tell you, the team I'm a part of, it's so much stronger right now for the time I stepped out. It's incredible. And what that gives us the flexibility to do is great, because it also means if I'm not here, they carry on. Everything comes to a screeching halt. It's okay. No, we know the drill. We can manage this. That doesn't mean you just sort of throw up your hands and walk away and they deal with everything. And it does take a team, but you've got to be thoughtful in how you manage all of that. And there are a lot of pieces that I probably wasn't as thoughtful about. Now I understand the pre-planning and what I need to do. And to your point, if it allows me the freedom and the liberties to look at some of the bigger picture stuff and pursue that versus worrying about the more daily level pieces that we need done.
So in terms of your involvement in agriculture and following the path that you are, who are those that have inspired you along the way and sort of that you look up to and the like?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of folks that I've bumped into over the span of my career. There's a gentleman that I worked for. He was the principal of an agricultural high school in the city of Philadelphia, which it's the largest city in Pennsylvania, very urban area, and people would not expect an agricultural high school to be there. And it happens to be the school I went to, and this was a gentleman not from a farm background. But he stepped in and embraced agriculture as a way to engage students from an urban background and give them a different appreciation for the industry and the chance to apply hands-on learning each and every day. And he really I think he helped instill in me that sense of how important it is for students to get to try things and learn them, and the sense of accomplishment that can come from agriculture, and then the career that spanned from there. So Tom Scott was his name, and he just was an incredible mentor to me, and gave me the flexibility and the freedom to have big ideas, which until that time I had sort of had in my career, but nobody that just gave me that trust to say, okay, well, let's go see if it works. from there, I actually went and worked for a gentleman called Russell Redding, who was the Secretary of Agriculture in Pennsylvania. And I got to be his executive assistant, and the most committed, thoughtful public servant I've ever met, and just taught me the importance of service, just service to others, and what that means in terms of agriculture. And I think really helped stoke that fire for serving the industry and the people who are in it. And then I met this gentleman named Jim Gelch, and he changed my life. He's the CEO of Nuffield International, and he and Barry Cudmore from Canada and Peter Nixon from Australia, and later Stuart Wright from New Zealand, were just incredible models and guides and people who stepped in and just kept saying to me, the first time they offered me the chance to go to Nuffield as a delegate, I turned it down. And honestly, in hindsight, I think it's just because I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I would fit in. I didn't feel smart enough to go. And it was imposter syndrome the whole way around. And I didn't want to do it. And they kept at it. They kept saying, no, we really think you ought to try it. And then when I went, it was the smartest and dumbest I've ever felt in my life for a straight days. But they pushed me to do it. And Jim has become the guy that I never want to let him down. And he's visionary, but he's also really good at finding other people that don't have his talents that can complement what he's up to. And just the opportunities they've given me to learn about and with and through Nuffield have been life-changing. As cliched as it sounds, it's really been life-changing. And I've just come to embrace this thought of, if Jim thinks I can do it, of course I can do it. Whether I think I can do it or not has gone out the window. It's just, if he thinks I can do it, I can do it.
Well, there's the human capacity building in action.
That's exactly right. So I think they're the folks that really, from a professional standpoint, have driven me. Very fortunate that in all of this, I've got a family that has no background in agriculture, but has been incredibly supportive and excited to learn about it. So, without them, there's really no global exploration that happens. And I'd say I'm also pretty lucky that some of the folks in my life have grasped onto what Nuffield is and have gotten as excited about it as I have. And so at this moment, I'm fortunate to have a boyfriend who's saying, yep, bring them to my state and we're going to set this stuff up, and off they go. And that's not something that I ever anticipated, is that the other people in my life would get as excited about this program as I did. I think all of that comes into play, because that's what keeps you inspired and you fresh, and it makes you want to grow more. Back to that point of capacity building. You feel like you've hit the plateau with it, you just want to keep going. And a lot of it is because those people have invested in you, and there's a sense of responsibility and obligation to keep that going.
So in terms of, obviously you're geared very highly around the leadership and people of agriculture. What does leadership actually look like to you?
So it's a great question. And I think it's one, just as with public value, there's no one definition to it. I think leadership has the same challenge, the same charge, the same frustration. Because if you'd asked me that 15 years ago, I probably would have said it's whoever's in the front of the room leading everything, and the person really driving change. And I think I've probably adjusted my thoughts on that. I think leadership really it's finding your voice and having the agency to step into issues that are important to you and be part of the conversation. It doesn't always mean you're the loudest voice. It doesn't always mean you're in charge. I think leadership is stepping up, stepping into a situation that needs people to be part of it and to have that voice. And I think in some ways we all lead. It's just in some moments you're leading by example, in other moments you're chairing a meeting. Sometimes it's by title. And working in public service, I found out it's not always the elected person that's the leader. Sometimes it's a staff member that's really helping to guide efforts. So I think it's really just having that confidence and voice to be an active part of a conversation or an issue that's important to you and potentially, hopefully, from perspective, important to the public good.
That's a really, really good perspective on that, I think. That's great. What, in terms of global agriculture, or US agriculture? Or, I mean, I know you're looking at things from a much bigger, broader picture now, but what do you think is the sort of, what do you see the number one challenge to agriculture is? And, you know, what do you think we as leaders of agriculture can do to help shift that?
That's a great and not small question.
Oh yeah,
That's my next
let's go to
dissertation.
let's you know, in a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be wildly optimistic, but I think in terms of feeding a growing population, we'll figure a lot of that out. I think the natural resource management, the improvements we've made over the past few decades will continue, and I think we're going to find new and innovative ways to feed people. I think the greatest challenge is on the culture and the people side. I think it's both awareness around what we do in agriculture and an appreciation for it, but also understanding that we often let other people have our voice or tell us what to do. And it's not because we want it to be that way. It's because in the United States, it's only 2% of our population that produces the food, fiber, and fuel that sustains us. It's a very small number of people. So a lot of people don't understand what we do in agriculture. And that's not unique. In the developed world, those numbers are comparable. So understanding what's happening in agriculture and telling our story proactively is really important. Building engagement with consumers is really important. Ag policy, what we live by is quite often defined by people who don't understand what we do around the world. And I think that's a really big challenge. Started to step into some higher level organizations, and scholars are appearing in places globally that are with some pretty big decision makers on the agriculture front. And that actually gives me a lot of hope and a lot of excitement, because it's astounding how many groups have opinions on agriculture but don't actually have farmers among them. I think that's a challenge because we lose the translation. There are people that understand the science of agriculture and can take that to governments, or can take that to foundations, or can take that to consumers. So having that voice and that agency and developing people who can lead in that sense is really important. And I think it's a massive challenge for agriculture. I think helping people understand what we do and the fact that there is no silver bullet for most of this. It's about continued conversations and being proactive is really important. And as a communicator, I think that's a critical way to address the challenge. It's building relationships, it's having conversations, it's understanding how what we do and how we do it might be perceived by people who don't have that background. All of that comes into play. And I think that's where initiatives like Nuffield are critical, because start to build people who are thinking about agriculture in very different ways, but still, this is a terrible pun, but still have their roots in the industry. You know, they're connected to it. It's important to them. All of this is going on. So all of that matters. And I think having scholars be those translators and build those bridges are important, because Nuffield doesn't come at this with a political agenda, with a social agenda, with a production agriculture agenda. It's really representing the scholars and who they are and what they're doing. I think that can start to build change in communities. That can start to build change within the industry. That starts to build change at the country level. And that bubbles up to be a global movement. And as we look at feeding the growing world population, and we look at the natural resources that we're entrusted with, be that land, water, air, animals, all of that comes back together. And it's this microcosm that scholars or people that have had this capacity building experience are uniquely positioned to talk about and give thoughts on. And I think that's where I get excited about it, because it's not just about the production piece, and it's not just about global trade. It's also about developing communities. You know, agriculture is the foundation of a stable society. How do we make sure that all nations have that? And how do we help not just dump product and build false markets, but really look at what we can do as an industry to start to develop agriculture globally and meet consumer preferences and trends. Yeah. And hopefully get ahead of them and help explain what we're doing. there was a great line at a Nuffield conference that said, it's really about how much you care. It's not just about how much you know. And I think the scholars can help bring that together.
Yeah. I think it's really important that we do have people that are that conduit and help bridge the disconnect as well that sort of what does exist within society. But
yeah,
that was a big question. I think
and I got a little excited with the answer.
You did very well. Jean, look, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. As you can see, the light is actually now on me, so my the melatonin's kicking in. It's not just caffeine that's keeping me awake now, but I mean, it's clear that you're passionate for the people and leaders within the agricultural industry. Personally, from my dealings with you, I know that just how driven you are towards that and committed to that you are. So you're a credit to yourself, to the people that have guided you along the way and where you're going in the future as well. So thanks again, Jean. And
my pleasure. I'm sorry it was so early for you, but it was certainly the highlight of my day to get to have this conversation. So I appreciate it.
And now you get to go on spring break.
That's exactly right.
So going, you're fine.
That's exciting. And this is the great precursor to my actual dissertation defense. So thank you for the trial run.
Oh, pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Andy.